Hello, our today's guests are Mr. Borut Mohar, co-founder and creative director at DD Geopolitics. He is joining us from Slovenia, and Miss Sarah Bils. Miss Sarah Bils is the co-founder and analyst at DD Geopolitics. Welcome, both of you.
Thank you for
Thank
having
you for having us.
First of all, Mr. Borut, we'd like to know from you. You have been recently to Russia, and you have visited Donbas and the nuclear power plant also. So can you
Yes.
please share with us in briefly your experience, how it was?
Definitely. So I visited Donetsk in December, and 2 weeks ago I visited Zaporozhye region. So two different experiences, I would say. In that, briefly, for Donetsk, for anyone who has followed the conflict in Ukraine since 2014 will know that Donetsk was pretty impacted. The region and the Lugansk and Donetsk were pretty impacted by the so-called anti-terrorist operation, and then later the special military operations. And you can see that in Donetsk. But as far as let's say life goes, people have adjusted. It's pretty surreal to see that life goes on in the city, in the region. Of course, now the front line has been pushed so far that artillery strikes on the city itself aren't really possible anymore. But of course, there are new technologies, new weapon systems in use, such as drones, American supplied missiles. While we were there, actually, a US supplied HIMARS missile hit around, let's say, 200 meters from our hotel. It was an eye-opening experience. The whole hotel shook. On the contrary, the Zaporozhye region, which I visited, I returned 2 weeks ago, was largely unaffected by the conflict. In early 2022, the Ukrainian forces basically retreated to the city of Zaporozhye and across the river. So there was no major fighting in the early stages. However, maybe your viewers, maybe they know, in 2023, the Ukrainians launched so-called counteroffensive. The Zaporozhye region, the main objective was to cut the land bridge to Crimea. It was supposed to go in a few stages, cutting the defensive lines of the Russian armed forces. Tokmak was a city that was like first on the menu and then pushed south. Of course, that didn't materialize. So we visited Tokmak. Let's say our base was Melitopol, which is a pretty large city, let's say south in the Zaporozhye region. And in contrast to Donetsk region, there's not much, let's say, destruction. The city was basically handed over. But as soon as you get closer to the front lines, we visited Tokmak. Tokmak was in spring, I want to say late April, early May 2024, when the Ukrainian counteroffensive fizzled out, was hit pretty hard, basically by retaliatory strikes by Ukrainian forces. So they hit high-rise residential buildings. They hit basically institution which was supposed to house children with disabilities, so a learning institution that was hit by US supplied HIMARS multiple launch rocket systems. But fortunately, there was nowhere there at the time. So they retaliated. It's against people they consider their own countrymen, which is pretty horrific if you think about it. The Zaporozhye nuclear power plant, we had it was a privilege to visit because the security is so tight. It's really hard to get permission to get into the power plant. But I got with a bunch of our colleagues, reporters from around the world, we got access to the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant. We had a meeting with the director of the power plant. Let's say we were there for about 3 hours. So we had a meeting. We walked around the perimeter of the power plant. So you can't really get to the reactors, but we got to see, let's say, the spent fuel storage up close, which is, I'll circle back to that later. So in the 3 hours we were there, we heard, let's say, 3 strikes nearby. I can't tell where it came from. I mean, I have a pretty good idea where it came from, but where it hit, was it air defense? Was it artillery? I can't tell you. There's an International Atomic Agency, so UN presence at the power plant constantly now. I think around 28 observers are at the power plant right now. But the rotations are now conducted through the Russian side, because the Ukrainian side targeted a recent rotation of the UN mission. So I had the chance to see a 155 millimeter artillery shell, which is, I don't know if your viewers know or not, there's a big difference between artillery shells of Soviet and Russian design, which is 152 millimeter, and NATO style, which is 155 millimeter, which actually had the Latin lettering, not Cyrillic, on it. That artillery shell was found in one of the cooling ponds of one of the reactors. So I probably don't have to emphasize how incredibly dangerous it is just to shell
Miss Sarah,
nuclear power.
yeah, Miss Sarah, you are an analyst and expert on geopolitics that we understand. So, in your opinion, how do you see the current conflict between Russia and Ukraine?
Well, currently, obviously, Russia has the momentum and they have the leverage. I see actually an increase in Russia's activity, especially air assaults and sorties and mission strike packages. So I think that it will carry on even more so in the Russians' favor. And that they're kind of in the driver's seat of this and kind of deciding where it goes from here, politically and militarily, I believe.
And in that case, I mean, how do you see the future of Zelensky or the future of this world?
Oh, me? Well, I don't think that Zelensky is very long for this world, if not long for that office. I think that Trump has made that very clear. I just don't think that Ukraine is a top priority right now, and it's not good to kind of mix things up so badly or create such political upheaval in Ukraine, but it is coming because Zelensky and Trump just do not get along. Borut probably knows a lot more about the actual political the current political trajectory of Ukraine. They're kind of moving things around inside of their upper echelons. The Rada's not very happy, and there has been sort of opponents to Zelensky that have kind of been silenced or kind of pushed to the wayside. Borut might know more about that, though.
I mean, I would say you can see the hawks starting to circle around Zelensky. There's a lot of infighting. I would see in the political circles. You have Yulia Tymoshenko criticizing Zelensky. You have Petro Poroshenko, the former president, criticizing Zelensky. Everyone knows that elections will have to be held sooner or later. Trump basically said that that would be one of the conditions. So I think everyone wants a piece of the pie. Now that makes it really dangerous because, in my opinion, Zelensky is not in charge. I think his advisors like Andrei Yermak and a bunch of others, also some nationalist elements, are and the British intelligence have Zelensky like propped up still. So it's hard to say how things will develop. Now he's all over the place, in my opinion. He's trying to get support from the European Union. US support is kind of waning. He's trying to stir up trouble and exploit the China-USA kind of trade war to get Trump on his side again. Towards China, we have seen captured Chinese soldiers. So it's hard to say how this will end. But like Sarah said, I don't foresee anything good for Zelensky. Not because Russia might do something, but I think that like in Ukraine, when this everything ends, he might, let's say, to say it bluntly, he might be hunted around the world by certain elements of a Ukrainian political sphere.
Sarah, you just told me that Zelensky is not getting along well with Trump. The way he was treated by the Biden administration, almost like a hero, and every time writing the check for billions of dollars, I think that floodgate of cash has stopped. But Zelensky is trying to somehow mobilize the support in his favor from the European Union nations, and also UK. Let's say the rest of the NATO. So, I mean, in your opinion, do you think that United States is also a part of NATO? But now, since NATO nations are somehow moving towards Zelensky, not towards Trump, so do you think NATO is becoming a kind of threat to Donald Trump?
I do, and I think that that was alleviated. So I was actually just discussing this before I hopped on. We were talking about how, the Trump administration has kind of made a lot of grandiose claims and now has had to back off of them. I think you're really correct to bring up the NATO thing, because when the administration was kind of making it sound like they were going to back away from NATO and allow and push the EU to kind of make their own decisions, the EU started to show that they were going to. And now the United States has backtracked off of that. Marco Rubio has recently stated we will not be leaving NATO. And I think that that's why. I think it's because the EU was going to have to move and diversify their military imports from other sources, i.e. China, India, et cetera, in order to get, because they're staying in this war for the long haul as far as we can see. And with that, the United States said, well, we can't lose those sort of military contracts or this control that we have over this conflict and future conflicts. And so they immediately backtracked off of that and said, we will not be leaving NATO. And I think that that has a lot to do with it, because the EU, they kind of have to stay in this war. It's their war. So the United States kind of needs to, I guess, accept that. But I'm sure that the United States will back off of their funding directly to the conflict and just push it through the EU.
Mr. Borut, do you think, I mean, in your opinion, I want to hear from you. Both of you are experts. I mean, do you think that the United States has tried a lot to tame Vladimir Putin, President Putin, and Russia as well, by freezing their assets, by imposing sanctions and sanctions and sanctions? And now, I mean, Trump is in the White House. So, I mean, how do you see this kind of these sanctions and freezing assets, Russian assets? I mean, in my opinion, it was simply stealing the wealth of the Russians. I mean, in the name of sanctions. But now the whole thing has changed, because as Ms. Sarah, I was discussing with her, that now it seems that the NATO has taken a side against Donald Trump. So United States tried to isolate Putin. Now, possibly, United States itself is becoming isolated from the rest of the world. What is your opinion?
So as for sanctions, I mean, Russia has been under sanctions for years now, even under Donald Trump. One of the harshest sanctions were imposed under the first presidency of Donald Trump. But there's a difference how sanctions are implemented between the European Union and the United States. So in terms of after 2022, I don't think the sanctions from the United States were that hard. In my opinion, but this is my personal opinion, is Donald Trump and the Americans have to pivot towards China sooner or later. So they dumped Ukraine on the European Union and the European Union NATO allies. I don't think the second is Trump won this election on his kind of peace campaign. I'm going to end this war in 24 hours. It's been way over 24 hours, but okay. So they're looking for an off-ramp, but not in the way that some people think. I don't think they want to be friendly with Russia, and I don't think they want to be hostile against the European Union too much. Of course, they want to get to the 5% budget now. Like my country, for example, it's hilarious. We didn't even achieve 2% Slovenia is in NATO. We didn't even achieve 2%. We've been struggling to achieve 2% for 10 years now, and they want 5%. So that's not happening. But I think the UK and the European Union kind of took over the Ukraine project from the Americans. Americans have to pivot to China. We've seen it in the last few days. Things are heating up between them. So I think maybe this ends for Americans like, okay, we tried to get Putin, we tried to get Zelensky to sit down, didn't work, hands off, try to save face as much as they can.
Ms. Sarah, we know, you and I and Mr. Borut, both of all of us know that regarding the Gaza issue, I mean the Israel and Palestine conflict, so Donald Trump more or less is somehow supporting Israel. Naturally, there is attack in Gaza continuing even now when we are talking. But about Zelensky or Ukraine, in real sense, Trump is not taking some stern action. Until now, what we hear is what we hear, but don't see any actions. What is the reason that Trump's Gaza policy and the Trump's Ukraine policy? Why is this a difference? Because he is reluctant in doing anything in Ukraine.
Well, he's beholden to Israel. He was given over $200 million for his Ukraine from Israel supporters and Zionists. So he's beholden to these people. Not to mention Trump himself is a very staunch Zionist, whether you agree with Zionism or not. Trump and his family, his children are all staunch Zionists. His son-in-law is one of the largest proponents of Israeli expansion in the Middle East, Jared Kushner. So he has his own personal and business interests in that region. There's also the religious aspect to it. And while I don't believe that Donald Trump is a particularly religious person, the people in his cabinet they are very strong Christian dispensationalists, which makes them very strong Zionists. So this is something that they feel truly in their heart of hearts, that this is the right thing to do. With Ukraine, I think that there's a facade that's kind of fallen. We've lived in a century of Cold War propaganda, and eventually, you can only call the boogeyman so bad, and if he doesn't do anything, eventually that sort of wears off. You're no longer scared of something can't do anything to you, and that's where America's kind of gotten to, where it's like, you've threatened us about Russia for these last 100 years. They're not really that big of a threat. And even Trump is kind of echoing that sort of sentiment. So that there's also the idea that Trump sees it as much more beneficial to form a bloc with Russia and Israel to thwart China. So that's part of it. So Trump's not really eager to help Ukraine, quote unquote, win. They're not going to win, but to help Ukraine gain any ground. He's very, very hesitant to that. Do you see this sort of desire for an Israel, Russia, United States bloc, especially coming out of the Americans? And that won't be able to happen if they pushed Zelensky too far.
Now, my final question of this episode to both of you, which I think very important, that when there is a conflict, intensified conflict in Gaza, you and I and Mr. Borut, all of us know that Saudi Arabia, which is considered as the leader of the Muslim world, they have somehow backtracked from the whole issue, not saying anything, but they have backtracked. Muslim nations, including Qatar, which was the top patron of Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad and other groups in Gaza, they have also become silent. This is one side. Another side, some Muslim countries, for example, Bangladesh, they are now showing suddenly increased volume of resistance and revolt and movement against the United States and Israel together. Even Pakistan is silent at this moment. Bangladesh is showing, because as you both of you may know, that since the 25th of August last year, there is a jihadist coup in Bangladesh, and we have an Islamist regime which was planted by George Soros, etc. Now, when you say Zionist, George Soros is a Jew, but this government in Bangladesh, it is working against Israel openly. It is also threatening Trump openly. So under such scenarios, as you said, Trump is somehow influenced by Zionists. So do you see, both of you, this is a very important question, any consequence ultimately coming towards the Muslim nations, which are now showing too much revolutionary face under the current scenario?
I don't think that there will be too much backlash. I think this is expected. You mentioned George Soros. Yeah, he is a Jew, but he's not a Zionist. He believes in the state of Israel, but he does not support the current state of Israel in its current form. So that's a good reason why he would support these sort of antithetical regimes around the world that kind of push back against Israel. George Soros and Bibi do not get along. They never have. So that's that. No, I don't think that it would be Bibi that would have to push Trump to do these sort of retaliations against other Muslim countries. And especially in South Asia, I don't see that happening because retaliating against South Asia is not in the best interest of the United States. He's also taken more, and I'm sorry to say this might be bad news for Bangladeshis, but he's also taken a little bit of a hands-off approach and said, Modi, you're kind of the expert in this region. You should kind of steer the way, and I don't really know what's going on. And maybe I don't think that's a very good thing, but most people would say that's not a very good thing, but I don't foresee a backlash because Bibi doesn't have that enough pull over Donald Trump to ask him to extend himself so thin that he's then disciplining Muslim countries for pushing back against Israel. I just don't foresee that happening. Or maybe they'll just change your regime again. Maybe they'll just they'll just do another color revolution in Bangladesh. Maybe, who knows? I don't know. But maybe Borut has some more insight.
I mean, I agree with Sarah, but I also think it's not in interest right now. I think the region itself, they're pretty preoccupied in the region itself. So like we can hear threats against Iran. There's a whole situation going in Syria. So I think they're mostly preoccupied with that. I haven't noticed in Muslim Asian countries, even in the news, maybe some like backlash from the Zionist or in American media. As far as regime change goes, I don't know. USAID has been kind of dissolved, so hopefully that won't happen. Hard to say. With Bibi, Trump, there's so unpredictable. I would say so radical. So it could happen overnight. Something so he can change his mind. I couldn't really tell.
We will resume our interview with these two esteemed guests with the follow-up stories about, as Ms. Sarah Bils said, that as Ms. Sarah Bils mentioned, that there could be a color revolution, a regime change against in Bangladesh. And also we are going to discuss about the possible relations, what is fate of relations between the Trump administration and the Modi administration, and also the Trump's tariff war. We are going to discuss this in the next coming episode. Stay tuned.